Welcome back to the Bernard Lee Poker Show. We are doing our wrap-up of the 2022 WSOP here with Robbie Strazynski, who is the owner and founder of CardplayerLifestyle.com, and also Chad Holloway, who is PokerNews' executive editor of the U.S. We talked a little bit about some of the ideas previously, but let's talk right now about the main event. Well, let's talk about what kind of stood out with regards to it. Robbie, why don't you kick us off?
Sure. I guess the headliner of what stood out is 8,663 players. Almost the record. Almost
110 off. 110 off. Yeah.
So that is just poker is back. There's no such thing as poker is dead. No such thing as poker's on the decline. It's practically, they were flirting with the 9,000 number this year. It's practically a guarantee, almost. And I'll go ahead and put it out there as well. It's going to be 9K next year.
I think, to be honest, I think it might break 10. I really do. I really think so. I really do.
All signs are positive indicators that the game is going great. I came in. My first main event was 2016, and at the time everyone was like, oh, you should have seen how it was back in 2003, 4, 5, 6, the Jamie Gold year. And okay, well, this is how it is. This is how many people were flooding the hallways. So that is a fantastic indicator for poker. If you look also, it's also pre-pandemic, we had 85-69 in the Hossein Ensan year. So, we've got that momentum back from the 66-50 of the pandemic year. So all very good things. And also one thing that stood out to me, I came in also as a fan watching Moneymaker on ESPN. You look at those tapes now, the old recordings, and okay, I could outplay this guy. This is strategies happening, from 20 years ago. And you see, we're always talking about how the game is getting tougher. The game is getting tougher. And when you're watching the broadcast and you're seeing the caliber of play, the moves that are being made, the folds that everyone is having, and then you see also, who's in the last 50, who's in the last 20, it's harder and harder for amateur players like that complete Cinderella story to happen. You really have to know poker, again, not necessarily be a pro, but at the very least a serious recreational player who studies, understands GTO and all that kind of stuff to really penetrate deeply. And also the caliber of commentary has risen as well, because that's the audience. We understand play a lot more. So that's what stood out to me most from this year's main event.
Yeah. Chad, what about you?
I thought this year's main event was one of the stronger ones, despite there not being a really big name pro at the main event final table, right? You did have Asher Conniff, who is very accomplished. Those of us in the industry know him, but I don't think he's got a lot of name recognition with the mainstream. But that said, I just thought the level of play was very strong. You had some characters at this final table. It was a very international affair. You had people, players from Norway, Australia, Argentina, the UK, Croatia, the United States, and Canada. So you had, a worldwide presence there. You had big hands, players who weren't afraid to play. And then kind of the shocker to me, Matthew Su came in as the chip leader to the final table and ended up busting in 9th place. He wasn't the first off the final table, because Asher Conniff was, because they had to go 10-handed at this final table the day before it had went so long. But Matthew Su going from chip leader to out in 9th place was reminiscent of Philip Hilm back in 2007.
That's right.
Yeah, back in 2007. And so, from a viewer standpoint, it's one of those storylines that's entertaining. For Matthew Su, I'm sure it was soul crushing. I do feel for the guy. I'm sure you have high expectations, and then things just don't go your way. That's poker sometimes. But all in all, I left it thinking, wow, this was one of the stronger, most entertaining final tables that I can recall, at least in the last, 3, 4, 5 years.
Sure. And like you said, Asher Conniff, who's been on my show, WPT champion, WSOP circuit main champion, he went out in 10th place. And so some people are saying, wait a second, I thought the bubble was 10th. If you didn't watch it and you didn't know, this day 7 was unbelievable. It just kept going. Around 3, 4 in the morning, there were still 13, 14 people left. This was not going to end anytime soon. it was reminiscent of when Greg Merson won with Jesse Sylvia and Jake Balsninger. I remember about 2:00 going to bed and being like, we'll figure out what happens in the morning. I got up in the morning, turned the TV on, and they're replaying it. And I was like, wow, that's amazing that ESPN's replaying it at 8 in the morning. You'd think they'd have like some Sports Center on or something like that. And then all of a sudden I realized they're not replaying. They're actually still playing. And that's kind of what happened in this scenario too. They were playing at like 8 in the morning Vegas time. So when I woke up, I turned it, I went on, and I'm like, they're still playing this thing? This is unbelievable. So an incredibly long day. And you had a lot of people kind of going back and forth. They thought it would end earlier. They thought it would, so like if you think you're ending it earlier and you're like top 5 in chips and you decide to lock it down to be like, well, there's 12 left, I'm going to make it. You didn't make it. I mean,
I'm curious to know your guys' thoughts on this, because I think I'm in the minority on this. You had a lot of people during that final table when it was going 16 hours or whatever it was saying, this is ridiculous. The WSOP should not subject these players to this while they're playing for this amount of money and this, that, and so forth. I think that's a bunch of nonsense. Honestly, I like the marathon aspect. You have to deal with whatever comes your way. There is a stamina aspect to poker.
Sure.
Like you can't just say like, oh, we'll start the tournament when everybody has 8 hours of rest and have had a good meal and feels like they're playing at the top of their game. No, you deal with what you're dealt. And in this case, it was a super long day, but I like that. Who has the fortitude to plow through?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's amazing because I've interviewed the champion, Espen Jorstad, and he had said he felt like he works out all the time. He's in great shape. He felt like he was going to have the stamina over everyone else. And even he said, he goes, no, I was exhausted. So I agree with you. I mean, it's a very interesting scenario with regards to that. And, it is, I'm sure Jack will build in an extra day next year. That's a given. Don't be shocked if he builds in 2. Don't be shocked at all, because if this thing does break 10,000, you're going to have trouble even that 1 extra day. You may need 2. And, in the past, when there was dips in the registration, there were days that were only like 3-4 levels and they called it. So, I don't see Jack saying that that's a bad thing. The other opportunity is maybe lengthen the day ones just by 1 level. Like I remember when the first time I ever played in 2005, we started at 11. I think we ended at 4 in the morning. I mean, it was long, and you don't want it to be like that, but who knows? Who knows how it'll all play out? But the main event was definitely an interesting. Robbie, you have something?
Yeah, the one comment I'd have on that is like, of course, naturally the focus is on the players and how does it work with their stamina and building in extra levels. Is the structure too good? So the one comment I have, like I'm not a tournament director. I can't speak to that. And even as a player, sure, like however long you got, I need to play, I'll go ahead and play. I'll say what Chad said, and there's definitely a stamina aspect. But the unique wrinkle about the main event is that it is televised, and you've got a production crew to think about. And, having worked on that crew for 3 years as well, it would be nice if there was sort of more balance to it, of like knowing that every day is okay, even if it's 10 to 12 hours, but sometimes we had 8-hour days, sometimes we have 16-hour days, but like at some point, and these are, top professional producers behind the cameras, and you obviously want to continue producing that A+ product for everyone who's not there in person to watch. So I think that also, at least for the main event, needs to be taken into account of like, hey, 5 o'clock in the morning when you started, 2 hours before the players began as well, also should be considered. And I'm sure they do as well when making these decisions. So. Yeah,
absolutely. And, it was a great scenario with regards to the final table. And listen, what was really a neat story is Espen Jorstad, this wasn't his only bracelet. He won the tag team event. Of course, we all knew who came in runner-up, because we were all, especially my Run Good team, and we were all cheering for Jamie Kerstetter, who has obviously become an incredible commentator for the WSOP and almost now becoming synonymous with Lon and Norm. And I didn't realize that he won it, the bracelet, because I was so focused on that side of the table, not that side. And I don't know if everyone knows this, but this is the first time he's ever played in the WSOP. I had asked him what he thought about the switch from the Rio, and he's like, I don't know, I've never been to the Rio. It's my first one. I was like, what? Holy cow! It's incredible. So I mean, what an unbelievable story there for this gentleman to win it. And he said that he wants to try to be the best ambassador that he possibly can be. And I give him a lot of credit. Unfortunately, we've had some champions that's not their priority. Their priority is not being the best ambassador. They're like, hey, listen, I won a tournament, I won a lot of money, and what that I don't have a responsibility from there. From his discussion with me, he feels like he does have a responsibility. So I hope that he fulfills that and continues going forward. And he seems like he's been on the road traveling and playing in a lot of places, and finished just runner up to in one of I think one of the Triton events. So he's obviously playing and playing well, and good luck to him as he moves forward, and hopefully we'll have a great champion as we go on. Kind of in passing or in parting, and any other thoughts that you guys have about the 2022 WSOP, Chad?
Yeah, the WSOP Player of the Year race I thought was pretty interesting this year. It wasn't as tight as it normally is, and it didn't have some of the names that it normally does.
Right.
Nagano, for instance. But one name who's always been consistent in the Player of the Year race for the last 4 or 5 years is Dan Zach. And he's akin to finishing like third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, kind of in that range. He's always there, but has never broken through. This year, he finally did, and in pretty impressive fashion. So he won event number 15, which was the 10K Omaha High-Low 8 or Better Championship. This was his second gold bracelet. He defeated Dustin Dirksen heads up in a marathon 7-hour back and forth match. Yeah. And so that kind of put him towards the top, if not the top, of the Player of the Year race. And then less than 2 weeks later, he captures his second bracelet of the series, his third overall in the 10K Stud High-Low Championship. And that made him a 2-time bracelet winner for the summer. Early on through the first 40 events, that put him at the top of the Player of the Year leaderboard. And that's where he remained pretty much throughout. Now, he didn't run away with it per se. It did look like he was going to, but you had very strong year from Daniel Weinman. So he ended up beating him by about 500 points. He had 1,300 points more than Corey Aldemir and Sean Deeb. And then David Peters rounded out the top 5. And just quick shout out recognition to Corey Aldemir. He was the reigning main event champion. Traditionally, they don't come back and do much the following year, right? And he came back, had a very impressive summer. Like I said, finished third in the Player of the Year race. So I thought that was a very strong thing to put on his resume and for his legacy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, for him, he got very deep in the main event as well, back-to-back runs. And he even said it. He goes, I think within under 100 he finished. I mean, it's just incredible for him to get so deep in the main event back-to-back years. And he's definitely one of those players that it's not a joke. He is serious about what he does, and he's a really great player. And for him to get that run, and it's amazing, like it wasn't like everyone was going crazy over it. He just quietly kept moving forward and doing what he had to do. And next thing you know, with 4 to 5 tables left, you're looking over, you're like, wait, he's still in it. I mean, that's pretty amazing to see that the main event champion from last year is still in this thing. So I think that's really remarkable. He ended up finishing in 75th place and taking home $100,000. So, I mean, just great job by him. And I agree with you. Robbie, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, just further to Karai, like what always helps, I'm already like hyped enough every year before the World Series begins, but the day before, 2 days before the World Series of Poker begins each year, there's that 25K fantasy draft. And this year it was televised, live streamed from the Poker Go studio. And, of course, the reigning defending main event champion, his name will pop up, but he went for $2. which, you know, a Danzak, I think he went for 80 something or 70 something dollars. You know, he wins the player of the year, but, you know, people think, oh, okay, the main, you know, it's almost like a stereotype, as Chad had said about, oh, okay, how will the main event champ do? And yeah, he goes ahead and makes that deep run in the main event, but he finished sixth in the Poker Players Championship. He had a cash in Raz. He had a cash in a PLO event. This is not just a plain old Hold'em kind of guy. People almost forget he had won over $10 million prior to his main event win. Which is kind of incredible. So yeah, definitely I want to give that continued shout out, and he will go for much more than that. He will not be a sleeper pick in next year's 25K draft. The one other thing I'd like to say also, we talked about the $1 million bounty, and you know, I think we all kind of see that growing with additional bounty events coming. It's kind of a little difficult because it's a mystery bounty. You never know when the big ones are going to come up. But I sort of followed it, and I think a lot of us did, on sort of social media. If you weren't in the room, you didn't see it on the big screen as each bounty was being pulled. That's how you sort of heard what's going on. That's how the news spread. If somehow, and it was their first year they ever did it, if somehow they can figure out how to also, you know, televise that, show that to the greater audience, you know, or maybe even through some sort of, you know, if it's always just being covered and then they put that together as like an edited package to highlight even more how cool this mystery bounty is, perhaps that may bring even more people. Put that as like, I don't know, in between on break during the main event, have that 30-minute edited segment of, oh, this was the $1 million bounty, and maybe that'll pique some more interest. I think that could be pretty cool and just a further enhancement of that. But yeah, overall, great World Series, fantastic main event, and you know, already, you know, it's how many more months away, how many more days, and I can't wait till the 2023 incarnation.
You know, it'll happen. Christmas will happen. It'll come through, and then January we're like, "Where's the schedule? Where's the schedule? Where's the schedule?" We're gonna be texting Kev Math. Do you know? Do you know? Do you know? Do you know? You know, that kind of thing. It's incredible. And mentioning Corey Aldemir, who went for so little. The one person who was absolutely thrilled, of course, was Maria Ho. And why? Because she chose him for the fantasy, and her team won. They came in first. So never a bad thing for that scenario to happen. And those are the sleepers, right? You want to get somebody dirt cheap for $2 so that your high performers have to do well, but you got to get somebody low down there. And obviously, Karai did a fantastic job. I just want to wrap up by kind of reiterating what Chad said from the beginning and kind of bookending it. Kudos to Jack Effel, Ty Stewart, the entire WSOP staff. Incredible. I mean, really, we're really excited. We're looking forward to it. I think everyone now is kind of getting into the rhythm of us being on the strip. And as I mentioned before, it's not just the location and everything, but just the convenience of, hey, you want to go get something to eat, and you're not stuck at All-American Burger and, you know, the couple other things. You can go anywhere, and it's just within walking distance. And just to be able to go to other casinos, people staying in other casinos, where at the Rio that was just very difficult to do, and be able to walk back and forth. I think the World Series is in great shape. Obviously, the World Series circuit here in the U.S., but now there's an international circuit schedule going on. So that's generating interest as well. Of course, there's often the WSOP Europe and Asia. So I think the World Series brand is growing. And I think that the home in the summer, we found it, and it's going to be here for a while. So it'll be fantastic. So to you two gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me once again on our 2022 WSOP wrap-up. And we will probably do this about a year from now again. And hopefully there'll be good news from the World Series. But thank you, Chad. Thank you, Robbie. Really appreciate it. And for everyone, stay tuned. Tons of interviews coming up over the next few months with WSOP bracelet winners. And a lot of people that we talked about during this we'll have on the show. And on top of that, we're going to be talking with players from the WSOP main event final table, including Asher Conniff, and of course, the champ, Espen Jorstad. He will be on the show as well. So As I always end every show, may you always go in with the best hand, and may you never get unlucky. Thanks, everyone. Good night.